What is up, guys? Welcome back to T4R Garage. Today we'll be doing a lift on our 2017 4Runner Limited here. In the previous episode we removed the exterior system from the vehicle, so today we can go forward and put that lift on the vehicle. It is a 3-inch lift by Old Man Emu along with upper control arms from JBA. Now that the exterior system has been removed from this vehicle, it is essentially the same as all the other 4Runners, whether that's the Trail, the TRD Pro, or the SR5. You can follow this video along now. So yeah, let's get into the project. I believe the first step is to remove the skid plate, so let's get into it. Great, so we got the skid plate out. Now we want to get this whole shock out, the shock and coil. The problem is our sway bar, as you can see, is kind of in the way. So for easier access, we want to take this whole sway bar out. So what we'll do to do that is we want to take off, this is the sway bar end link here. We're going to need to disconnect that. And then if you come under the vehicle here, there will be 2 bolts here holding it onto the frame with this bracket, and there'll be 2 more on the other side. So once we disassemble those, the sway bar should come out and give us better access to that shock. Great, so I've attached a 14mm to my impact gun here. Great, and now I'll do that to the other side. All right, so our sway bar has the end link here. So we need to undo this bolt. And the way to do that is we'll stick an Allen key in here and a 17mm wrench on here, and we'll undo this. The inside of here where you're supposed to put the Allen key can get a bit dirty, so I'm just gonna kind of take this and go around, just kind of get any road debris or dirt, rocks or anything out of there so that you can actually get your Allen key in. Perfect. I'll take my 17mm here. Okay, good. Okay, there we go. Good. All right, so now we want to undo our ABS line here from the top of our upper control arm. And then we're going to also want to secure this somehow. So once we remove this bolt on our upper ball joint, we don't want this coming loose, pulling on our ABS lines and our brake lines. So we want to secure this up and also undo this bolt here. All right, so I removed the cotter pin here from the bottom of the upper ball joint. I have a 19mm. So I'm going to go in here and just loosen this up. I think I'll start with a breaker bar and then maybe use an impact. I now have the spindle is attached to this mount here, so it's not going to go anywhere. Oh, wow, that's on there good. Great. Good. I've put a jack just under the suspension here, just to take some stress off of it. And then what we'll do is take this hammer. There we go. And it's loose. And it's a good thing we tied this because you can feel it's kind of pulling. We just don't want to put too much tension on any of these lines. Great, that came off. That's the ABS sensor. Good, so we're ready to take off the upper control arm here. We got 2 bolts, we got a bit of a splash shield, so. Okay, there's no. Yeah. Good, great, so that's out of the way. Now we'll undo this brake line here. Looks like either a 10 or a 12. Yeah, it's a 12. This line is right in the way of this, so I can't actually get a socket on there. I need to get a socket on, so got a 12 mil. Good. So I just move that forward so I can get a socket on here. All right, so it's a 19 millimeter socket. I'm gonna pop it on here and use a breaker bar now that that brake line bracket is out of the way. So let's see. Oh, yeah, it's on there good. All right, after a bit of cranking, I think it is loose. So let's see here. Yeah, not too bad. Great, and I'll slide the bolt out now that this nut is undone this end. I can slide the bolt out and it will actually come out under the hood. So getting that bolt there for the upper control arm out can be a bit of a struggle. The problem is there's some lines here. One of them you can actually just pull and move out of the way. This one's a more of a solid line, so you'll have to unbolt this little bracket. Great, once this bracket is loose, you can see the bolt, it's just there, but it actually comes and it contacts this AC line, I believe. It's AC compressor line. So now that it's loose, I can probably move it out of the way and yeah, there it goes. There we go. Great, so now I have that upper control arm out. I just, at the end there, I kind of had to jiggle the upper control arm and just kind of slide the bolt out. I might just leave the bolt here to actually take it out and get it in through all those lines would be quite difficult, so I'll just leave it in place there. Yeah, and now I think we can start to remove this shock and coil. So we want to get our shock out of here, or our strut assembly. So we have to undo 3 bolts here on the top and then 1 down here on the side. All right, so these are 14 millimeters. And they are torqued on there pretty good, so yeah, we'll take all 3 off. So I found these 3 bolts up here, or these nuts, very difficult to get undone. While you're doing other things, I'd put a penetrating lubricant on all of these just to loosen them up. It's quite a challenge there. All right, so it looks like it is a 19 millimeter. So I'll use a breaker bar here with a 19 millimeter on the end. And I'll just break this loose. So I'll pop the 19 on there. Great, now I can get that undone. Good. There we go. Now I got the shock assembly out. All right, so I got my spring compressor here on my strut assembly. I'm gonna be reusing the top part here, so I need to compress the spring and remove this and then take the spring out. So let's get to it. What seems to work best for this is a pair of vice grips along with the 17 mil. Kind of just put this on the ground and then just crank with your 17 mil. Like that. Make sure your vice grips are gripped on there very, very well. All right, great. So put the spring compressor on there and compressed everything. Remove this top part off the old strut. Compress this spring. This is our aftermarket spring here. And put it on our new shock. And then tightened up this bolt with the vice grips there. So I think it's ready for install. All right, so I got my upper control arm here. It was a bit of a pain to get in. I recommend using one of these and just kind of holding the bolt and feeding it through. Make sure your washers are in place before you put the control arm in. It really helps to have a second person to kind of help you do this. I'm just by myself, so using this was actually really good for being able to feed the bolt through. If you had somebody else, they could go in the engine bay and kind of just push it through. Anyways, now I'm going to torque the bolt up to spec here. So I believe it's 85 foot-pounds of torque. All right, so now I'm going to torque the upper control arm ball joint nut here. As per JBA, they want this at 60 foot-pounds of torque. I need a 22. Excellent. All right, so we've lifted the front end of our vehicle. Now we're going to come to the back end here. Lifting the back end is a lot easier than doing the front. There's a lot less steps involved. Basically, you just need to remove your shock here. So there's a bolt or a nut on the top here and a bolt on the bottom that's going to have to come undone. I believe those are both 17 mils. And then you have to remove your the bolt that's going up to the sway bar end link here. I think that you can put an Allen key on the back there, and it's a 17 mil to undo that. Make sure you have a lift under your rear axle. As soon as you undo your shock, it's going to drop down. So I've got that under there. In order for your axle to drop down far enough to get the new springs in, you may need to undo your track bar, which is right over here, and those are 19 mils. So anyways, let's get into it. All right, so let's start with the sway bar end link here. So I'll put my 17 mil on there. Great, and I've got an Allen key here. I'm going to pop that in the back. I did soak these overnight in penetrating oil to make sure they would come loose. This area of the car does get a lot of salt and water and stuff on there. These bolts can corrode a bit. So anyways, all right, so I found this pretty difficult to get undone here, the sway bar end link. Mine, you can see, the actual bolt is pretty rusted. This vehicle is only 4 years old, but somehow this bolt is corroded and so much dirt and grime from the road that I just, even with spraying it the night before, I just cannot seem to get it undone. I mean, it's really slow going. So I found an alternate solution. Instead, I'm simply going to just undo these bolts here on the sway bar, then it will come off the axle, and then I should be able to lower it down. So much stronger bolts. I know they're not going to break off. It's not going to cause me any extra work, so I'm just going to go that route. All right, so instead of doing the sway bar end link there, I just disconnected the sway bar from the axle. Now I'm going to undo my shock up here with a 17 mil. All right, so we got the top of the shock disconnected here. Now we have this bolt on the bottom. Great. All right, so we got our shock out. Sway bar's loose. We gotta get this track bar off. So it is a 19 millimeter. I'm just gonna use a breaker bar here to get it loose. There we go. Great. All right, so now with the track bar off, the shock off, and the sway bar end link, we can lower our jack here, and the axle's just coming down nicely. Great. All right, so there's one. And now I'll head over and go do that for the other side. What seems to help is if you actually push down on this end, it's going to be rotating on the drive line there. So if you push this end down, you can pull that spring out, and I'll do the same on the other side. All right, so just a little comparison here. This coil is much taller than the stock coil So I might need to compress this one. I'm going to try to get it on without compressing. So let's give that a go, and if not, we'll compress it. All right, so I think I saved myself quite a bit of time there. Some people might have used a spring compressor to do that. I basically just put my foot here and pushed down as hard as I could, which made the axle rotate down far enough that I could get that spring seated up there. So the trick is, when you're putting these in, you want to make sure that they're seated properly at the end there, which mine is. And then on the top, I'm going to make sure that this part seats on the top piece that goes through here, and you'll be able to see where the old spring ended. So yeah, I'll head over and do that for the other side now. All right, so here's the old spring. So this is that cap I was talking about. This has to go. The new coil has to go on there, and you can see where the end is. The old spring. Perfect, so that's seated properly. This end goes up and this end goes down towards or onto your axle. Great, so here's the passenger side. I'm making sure that it is seated nicely on the axle, and it comes up. And I got my piece that I've saved and reused from my old one, and I want to visually look up and just make sure that it is lining up with its kind of perch that it's supposed to sit in up here. And it is sitting dead center where the old one was. All right, so now I'm gonna raise my jack up, and I'm just gonna kind of get everything in alignment there. I'll reattach my sway bar, and I'll put my new shocks in. All right, so I got the new springs in here on both sides. Now I'm gonna jack the axle up under the differential here, and that will allow the springs to compress a bit, but it'll also push up my track bar so I can reattach that. And it will also give me the ability to reconnect my sway bar to the axle, and then put my shocks in. Okay, so just reattaching my sway bar here. All right, so ready to put the shock in here. So just bring it down like that. Just screwing in the lower bolt there, and we'll put the top bolt on. Great. Going to tighten the lower shock bolt here to 70 foot-pounds. Perfect. All right, so I got my shocks on here. We got our coils in. So our shocks have been put in on both sides. We got our coils in, they're properly seated. We've tightened everything up to torque spec. I'll put the torque specs in the description of the video. I've gone around the car now and I've just rechecked all the torque settings on the front. The last part I have to do now is just put the skid plate in on the front there, put the wheels back on. I'm going to lower it down, and then I'm hoping I can get this track bar here to line up properly. It's come out of alignment a little bit. So I think once I lower the vehicle, I'll be able to get that bar to just get into its slot, and then I can put the bolt in and tighten that. All right, the bolt slid in perfectly. Look at the nut on the other side there. And this is a 19 mil fastener, so I'll grab my torque wrench and torque this down to about 75 foot-pounds of torque. All right, so now we're going to torque our wheels to spec, which I believe is 85 foot-pounds of torque. All right, so I got the lift on the vehicle. All the wheels are tightened up here. It's getting late. It's about 11 p.m. at night. So tomorrow I'll take it out, take it for a test ride. breaking the components a little bit, get in alignment, and then I'll show you the after pictures or after videos. Super excited. I can already tell it's a lot higher in stock. Hopefully the ride quality is good.
Well, after looking at the before and after pictures, I could definitely benefit from some larger tires, perhaps some 285 70 17s, but maybe we'll save that for a future episode. If you guys like the content, please like and subscribe. I hope to come out with a lot more videos in the future. Thanks for following along. Bye now.